was about 17 at the time, and one night I got home from work much later than I normally would. I went straight to my room, changed clothes, and tried to settle down, but after a few minutes I realized I was actually pretty hungry. It was probably around 1 in the morning by then, and the last thing I wanted was to start cooking something and make enough noise to wake my parents. So I quietly made my way into the kitchen, figuring I could find some kind of snack and go straight back to bed. At that hour, I wasn't looking for anything complicated. I just wanted something quick that would keep me from going to sleep hungry. The kitchen had a door that opened directly into our backyard. It was an old wooden door, but my dad had installed a metal security gate on the outside of it. The gate had small openings that were meant to keep insects out, which meant that during the warmer months, we could leave the wooden door open and still have some protection while letting air move through the house. There was also an automatic security light outside. It was one of those lights that came on whenever its motion sensor detected movement in the yard. I was used to seeing it activate at night whenever I let my dog outside, so it wasn't something that normally bothered me. In fact, that night my dog wasn't even outside. He was back in my room waiting for me to return with whatever snack I managed to find. I started looking through the cupboards and eventually found what I considered the perfect late-night snack: Pop-Tarts. I knew my dog well enough to know that if I carried one back to my room, he would probably try to get his share, so I decided to eat them right there. I opened the package and started eating one without bothering to heat it up. I was standing there, half awake and just enjoying the fact that I had finally found something to eat, when I heard a faint whistling sound coming from outside. The wooden door was open, so the sound was easy enough to hear. At first, I didn't think much of it. My first assumption was that it was just the wind passing through the yard or around the house. But after listening for a few seconds, I realized the sound wasn't random. Someone was actually whistling a tune. I couldn't recognize the song, but there was something strange about the melody. It sounded almost cheerful and sad at the same time, which is difficult to explain, but that was genuinely how it came across to me. I stood there listening for maybe 20 seconds before I started convincing myself that one of my friends was probably messing with me. One of them lived down the street, and I wondered if he might have come around to the other side of the fence just to scare me. Then the security light came on. I immediately looked toward the yard, expecting to see someone standing there. But there was nobody. I looked around the areas I could see from the kitchen and couldn't find anyone or anything that seemed capable of triggering the light. Still, the whistling continued. That was the part that started bothering me. If one of my friends really was hiding outside, where exactly was he? I couldn't see him anywhere, and yet the sound hadn't stopped. At that point I was starting to panic, although I was still trying to tell myself there had to be a normal explanation. I remained standing in the kitchen, staring outside and waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. A minute passed, maybe a little longer, with the security light still shining and that same tune continuing from outside. The longer it went on, the harder it became to believe that someone was simply playing a prank. Then the whistling suddenly sounded much closer. Almost at the same moment, I noticed the handle on the metal security door moving. It wasn't just shaking from the wind. The handle was being pushed up and down, like somebody outside was deliberately trying to open the door. I stared directly through the metal gate, because the security light gave me a clear view of the area outside. There was nobody there. I couldn't see a person, a shadow, or anything else standing near the door. Yet the handle kept moving. The whistling sounded like it was coming from right outside. That was when I completely lost interest in my snack. I dropped the box of Pop-Tarts, turned around, and ran back to my bedroom as quickly as I could. I slammed the door behind me, locked it, and got under the blankets with my baseball bat and my dog. I didn't try to figure out what had been outside. I didn't go back to the kitchen to check whether the door was still moving. I just stayed there, After that night, I never went into the kitchen alone at night again. This happened during my junior year of college, which was already a period of my life that I don't look back on with much pride. One Saturday night, I was hanging out in our apartment with around half a dozen friends. We'd been smoking, and by the time we finished the last bowl, everyone was pretty far gone. We were relaxed, stupidly confident that nothing interesting was going to happen, and mostly just sitting around enjoying the night. Then someone knocked on the door. It wasn't a normal knock, either. It was loud and frantic, the kind of pounding that immediately makes you wonder what could possibly be wrong. The entire mood in the apartment changed almost instantly. We looked at each other and started trying to figure out what was happening. Given how much we'd been smoking and the fact that we were college students living in housing where we absolutely weren't supposed to be doing that, our first thought was that the police had somehow found out. Everyone immediately started panicking. The idea of getting caught was terrifying. I was already thinking about being kicked out of housing and imagining all the consequences before anyone had even opened the door. One of the girls in our group finally went over to see who was outside. What happened next was so bizarre that for a few seconds I honestly couldn't process what I was looking at. There was a man standing outside the door with extremely wild hair and no pants. He was screaming at her to let him inside. The girl immediately screamed and tried to shut the door, but the man pushed against it and tried forcing his way into the apartment. He was bleeding badly, and his body was practically collapsing against my friend as he struggled with the doorway. He wasn't making much sense. The only thing he seemed capable of saying clearly was, "Please." Everything else coming out of his mouth was incoherent yelling. He looked completely disheveled, frightened, and confused, and from where I was standing, I couldn't understand what could possibly have happened to him. One of my friends ran downstairs to help the girl at the door. I did not. I would love to tell you that I immediately stepped up and helped, but that would be a lie. I was absolutely terrified. I stood at the top of the stairs frozen, doing essentially nothing useful. If you've ever seen an old cartoon where someone reacts to a tiny mouse as though their entire house is under attack, that was basically me. I kept thinking the same thing over and over. What do we do? What are we supposed to do? Eventually, someone said we needed to call the police. That seemed obvious, but even then I was too panicked to do it myself. My mind was barely functioning. I remember feeling like I didn't even know what to do with my hands. Someone else finally made the call and told the police that an older man who appeared to be homeless was trying to force his way into our apartment. At least, that's what we believed. Our extremely intoxicated minds had come up with the simplest explanation available. There was a strange, bleeding, half-dressed man trying to get inside, so obviously we assumed he was a homeless person attempting to break into the apartment. None of us stopped to consider that there might be another explanation. While we waited for the police, I remained near the top of the stairs, still panicking and contributing almost nothing to the situation. My friend managed to wrestle the man back outside and was trying to calm him down. I focused on staying near the stairs, apparently deciding that guarding that particular patch of floor was the best contribution I could make. Eventually, the police arrived. The man was taken away in an ambulance, and once he was gone, we closed the door and returned to the living room. We were all still shaken and trying to understand what had just happened. Someone eventually asked whether anybody was still high anymore. Nobody was. After everything we'd just experienced, we decided to smoke some more and try to calm ourselves down. Over the following weeks, we talked about the incident repeatedly, going over the details and trying to make sense of it. I also conveniently tried to make my role in the whole thing sound slightly more useful than it actually was. Saying I had guarded the stairs sounded much better than admitting I'd basically stood there terrified. Then, about a week later, we finally learned what had actually happened. The man wasn't old, and he wasn't homeless. He was a friend of a friend who had taken a very strong dose of acid, completely lost control of the situation, somehow lost his pants, and ended up running through a field in a panic before eventually making his way to our apartment. That explanation somehow made the entire night even stranger.